The Creative Nonfiction Podcast is sponsored by Goucher College's Master of Fine Arts in Nonfiction. The Goucher MFA is a 2-year, low-residency program. Online classes let you learn from anywhere, while on-campus residencies allow you to hone your craft with accomplished mentors who have Pulitzer Prizes and best-selling books to their names. The program boasts a nationwide network of students, faculty, and alumni, which has published 140 books and counting. You'll get opportunities to meet literary agents and learn the ins and outs of the publishing journey. Visit goucher.edu/nonfiction to start your journey now. Take your writing to the next level and go from hopeful to published in Goucher's MFA program for nonfiction.
I'm hearing your electric guitar opening right now.
That's right, Elena. It's Riff O'Clock on a CNF Friday. Welcome, wayward CNFers. It's the Creative Nonfiction Podcast, the show where I speak to badass writers, filmmakers, movers and shakers about the art and craft of telling true stories. Here, you'll learn the story, tips and tactics that will inspire you to greater heights in your own work. I'm your host, Brendan O'Mara. Hey. Yeah. It's Elena Passarello. Not only is she wicked smart, but we had a super fun time. Loose, entertaining conversation about her approach to the work, her essays from Animals Strike Curious Poses, as well as her process, Metallica, and a host of wide-ranging topics. This was one of the rare in-person interviews, so we had a ton of fun riffing, with each other. She made the trip down from Corvallis. It was great. I think we had a great chemistry, and it was just a ton of fun. I probably talk a little too much about myself in this show, but that was the nature of the conversation, so do with that what you will. It's different when you can look someone in the eye. Like, this one had more of that. We're just two writers at a bar having a beer, and we were here just riffing off each other. It was just that was the nature of this one, and like I said, do with that what you will. You can follow Elena on Twitter at ElenaVox, so that's ELENAVOX. Feel free to follow me as well at Brendan O'Mara, and CNF Pod, FWIW. I always respond to tweets. Since you're here, right, why don't you consider A, subscribing to the podcast wherever you jam, and B, subscribe to my monthly newsletter over at BrendanO'Mara.com. Hey, it's once a month, no spam, can't beat that. Reading recommendations, I dig it. What else? Oh yeah. Today's episode is also brought to you by Creative Nonfiction Magazine. For nearly 25 years, that's a quarter century. Good at math. Creative Nonfiction has been fuel for nonfiction writers and storytellers, publishing a lively blend of exceptional long and short-form nonfiction narratives and interviews, as well as columns that examine the craft, style, trends, and ethics of writing true stories. In short, creative nonfiction is true stories well told. Well, this seems like as good a point as any to let you get to know the incomparable Elena Passarello. One more riff for good measure. Ooh.
Oh, that's awesome. Oh, cool. Well, yeah, we should probably, with respect to your time and so forth, we should probably rock and roll.
Let's do it.
A little bit, but I got it.
I'm hearing your electric guitar opening right now.
Oh, nice. I often wonder if that's something that people are off put by, but I can't help it. It's me. I'm a heavy metal guy. I love it.
We need more metal in creative nonfiction. We need more like power chords and, because when you see something that says like creative nonfiction podcast, I just imagine, like somebody's got like a Bon Iver song. So it's really nice to hear like, yeah.
What I liked about it too, so many podcasts or interviews that do delve into the arts, they tend to have an air of pretension with their music. Mm-hmm. And maybe it is, they feel like they're going to alienate people. But in this, day and age, you have to go to the fringe in any way you can, and
Right.
and that's just part of my thing. I love Metallica. Metallica's my band. December 5th, Melanie and I are going up to Portland to smash skulls. So that's it's baked into who I am. So I figured, why not make my little interview podcast with the throw up the horns and rock out.
Throw the CNF goat.
Exactly. Well, cool. Well, I gotta say thank you so much for making the drive down. This is going to be really fun. Doing these things in person is such a game changer, and it's great to be able to look someone in the eye and get a chance to talk about your wonderful work. This latest book is incredible and fun and whimsical, and it's an honor to get to talk to you in person.
Thanks. I'm stoked.
Cool. Well, I always love to chart the path of a writer, and I know yours is winding in the way you got to where you are. So why don't we start at square one, and why don't you say where'd you grow up, and what was your path? What was some of those lead dominoes that got you to where you are today?
Sure. Well, I grew up in Charleston, South Carolina, and Gwinnett County, Georgia. Gwinnett County is outside of Atlanta, but it was really far outside of Atlanta when I was growing up. Not so much anymore. The only sort of claim to fame in Gwinnett County when I was growing up is that Larry Flint was shot there. But I think we have an American Idol winner from there now. Okay. And I don't know, just regular kid. I just wrote papers and stuff, but I did a lot of artsy stuff, right? Like I didn't take U.S. history in school. I had to take it in summer school because I wanted to take orchestra and newspaper and the literary magazine and drama.
Wow.
Yeah. So kind of just shoved as much arts oriented stuff as I could. I think I just really liked expression and pop culture, and I liked being with people who made those sorts of things. So it wasn't that I was a musician or that I was a actor or that I was a writer. It was that I just wanted to be in the rooms with those people who were doing those things.
Yeah.
I think that's the first domino, really.
Yeah. At what point did you realize that those were your people?
Oh, probably right away. I mean, I don't really remember not thinking that. I think I always kind of just wanted to be with dance people, and always, or I'd forced the people in my friend circle, on the cul-de-sac at, who wanted to play t-ball. I'd be like, let's do a t-ball dance, or I was an only child. So all my stuffed animals, I would make little instruments for them, and I'd put a record on and I'd conduct them like they were in an orchestra. I think I just always wanted to surround myself with those kinds of people. But I don't remember not doing that, and I don't remember not reading, and I don't remember not writing, which I think is a more common thing for writers, always figuring that out. Was it like that with you? Were you?
It's funny. I wasn't I was drawn to reading and writing a bit, but I was also a pretty competitive athlete too. I played baseball and soccer, and I'm sorry. I'm going to fix this boom arm and get back to the conversation. It just started sliding on me. That's never happened before.
Now it really feels like we're in the room together, right? So it's the room is responding.
It is. I might even leave this all in. It's so organic.
It's like Saturday Night Live.
Exactly.
You never know what's going to happen.
Yeah. It doesn't. It has to. Well, what's the phrase they use? They don't air because it's ready. They air because it's 11:30 or something.
Is that? Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah.
They air. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, in any case, yeah. So I played ball, and my only ambition really growing up was to play pro baseball. Okay. And I was just I've said this before, I think, but I was just good enough where that dream wasn't quite a delusion. Mm-hmm. You come to realize that you do have to have an element of delusion to kind of push yourself to those extremes. Mm-hmm. You might want to win the X National Book Award or whatever, as subjective as that is, but maybe having that vision in your head is what's going to drive you to be the best writer you can be. it's kind of the, aim for the stars, land on the moon. That was kind of, I think, playing or aiming for, as unlikely as it would have been to play pro ball, like having that as my North Star made me like a very good high school player and a competent college player before I was cut. So, so there we go.
The great Lance of college.
Exactly. But stories, whenever in high school, or when I would write a story and get up there and read it, I could often, the whole class would be laughing. And so I could there was that performative element of it that I really enjoyed, being able to convey a story and entertain.
Yeah,
so
sure.
So in a sense, did you get that sense too when you were little, that you could entertain?
Yeah, or like I think some people who do things like orchestra or sports, they just do them, and some people really enjoy discourse surrounding them. Like people who reading articles in Sports Illustrated for kids or whatever, or getting to know the way that the commentators work on TV. A lot of my students and a lot of people that I know that come from a sports background that are writers, that was a part of what they loved about it, was reading, books about baseball, or sort of trying to figure out what makes a cool article, or reliving something amazing that happened from waking up the next morning and reading the sports section. So I think that's the commonality, is like, I didn't just love playing in the orchestra. I liked going to the library and learning more about Beethoven, or like we did Tchaikovsky, and somebody in the orchestra was like, did you know that he used to conduct with his hand at his jaw because he had a dream that his head was going to fall off when he was conducting? And I wanted to figure that out more. And then I wanted to go back to that room and like process the way that writers were processing it. You know what I mean? Like, I think the place where that really gets you in trouble is acting. I think you could probably do it in sports, maybe not, but, and you could definitely do it with music. But I think actors who like to think about acting, writing about acting and writing about performance, I think they get into their own heads and they can't be dumb enough to portray someone else. I mean, by dumb, I mean like...
Oh, I know exactly what you're talking
maybe
about.
Maybe it is the same in sports.
No, it is. You need to turn it off.
Yeah.
You cannot be in your own head. I was ultimately in my own head too much, and it's amazing I did as well as I did, given my various insecurities with it. David Foster Wallace has a great essay about this. How Tracy Austin broke my heart.
Yeah.
Did you read? Have you read that?
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah. That's what that is about. The crux of it is that what he was so disappointed about the athlete memoir was them trying to be reflective about it, but that's antithetical to how they're good. They can't explain it. They're able to just, with 20,000 people either booing them or rooting them on, they're able to somehow tune it out.
Yeah.
And he himself was a competent tennis player, and he too was too in his own head.
Right.
Eventually, he just couldn't turn that off and was too cerebral. So no, it's exactly the same.
Maybe we should start like polling all like nonfiction writers who come from all these different places, like sports or performing arts, and see if they all have this flaw, the thing that allows you to be delusional but not ultimately make it to the stars where you land on the moon. And it's that you end up thinking about what you're doing and trying to articulate what you're doing at the disservice of actually being able to do it.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
This is my new theory. I think we should. This is my podcast now.
Yeah, you need to write an essay on this.
It does seem like there are a lot of essayists who come from sports and a lot of essayists who come from, I guess the arts or something, but definitely a lot of nonfiction writers who played sports. My colleague at Oregon State University started in the sports desk at the University of Arizona. He's great, by the way. You should totally have him on. Yeah, I wonder if there's another kind of thing, like it's not David Foster Wallace tennis, but some other thing, like they're all chefs or something.
Yeah.
I wonder if it's the same.
Yeah, that's but it is the ones who can kind of get out of their own way are the ones that can excel, even if they aren't the most athletically gifted. Have you read Moneyball by Michael Lewis?
No, I just saw the movie. There's
a great moment in that when Lewis is recounting Billy Bean's his minor league career, and Bean was the picture of the perfect athlete. 6'2", big, can run, hit for power, run, big arm, you name it. And his roommate was this guy, Lenny Dykstra, guy no bigger than me, like 5'9", a little scrappy, little Jack Russell Terrier of a person.
Oh, cool.
And so as he's recounting the scene, Steve Carlton's on the mound, the Hall of Fame left-handed pitcher. And Billy Beane is, like I said, the picture of the perfect physique. And he's thinking, like, out there is a magazine cover, one of the greatest pitchers of all time. And then he turns over at Dykstra's he's like, he didn't even know. He's like, really? He's like, I'll get up there and fucking stick him. And it's just like, that was the difference. Like, Dykstra didn't care. He just was out there. He's like, I'm going to stick him.
Wow.
And meanwhile, Beane is thinking like, no, I'm going up against one of the greatest of all time. And there you have it. And Dykstra had not a Hall of Fame career, but he played 15 years in the pros, and Beane never made it.
Wow.
So there's the head game.
There you go. Huh.
So when you found your people, the more artsy crowd, when did you start gravitating towards acting?
I think right away. I mean, if you would have asked me at any, maybe even now, like at any point in my life, what I would much rather be doing of all the different things that I did, because I did play music for a long time and took lessons, and I did start with writing, taking it kind of seriously when I was younger. My parents really encouraged that, and I tried really hard to be good at school too. But I think if I had to pick one thing, I would have picked that. It seemed the coolest and the most fun and the most exciting, and I loved performing, and I was decent enough at it to like facilitate, taking it relatively seriously, although taking acting seriously is like the worst possible thing you could probably do. So yeah, I think that was the first thing. And then everything else I think that I did was kind of other things that people do when they like doing acting that is probably a little bit more sensible. Right.
Yeah.
So, and then I went to college and I got an English degree. I think there was something in my family where they were like, you can't audition for any like theater schools like Carnegie Mellon. So I went to a school right next door to Carnegie Mellon, University of Pittsburgh. And I did theater all through college, but I got a writing degree. And that's where I studied with Lee Gutkins, and learned about creative nonfiction and learned about sort of, while I was pretending that all I ever wanted to do was be in plays, I got this kind of awesome nonfiction education from, this was the 90s. So this is when Creative Nonfiction magazine was really in its heyday, and the genre was getting sort of super defined by that sort of movement. But yeah, then when I graduated, I went straight to theater. I managed a box office and started acting, and I got my union card, and I did a ton of plays. By the first year after graduating, I made a rule that I would never do free theater again. So while I didn't 100% sustain myself through theater, I wrote for alt weeklies and stuff like that, and I did kind of children's theater and box office stuff. I was advancing toward taking care of myself as an actor and a voiceover artist. And then when I was like 26 or 27, I started seeing some limitations to theater. Probably the most being that I wasn't amazing at it. And I am 5'6", and I have a football player's shoulders and a baritone voice, and I'm brunette. For a woman to work consistently, there are so few parts. She usually has to be kind of shorter and thinner and lighter. And I was sort of too old to play Juliet and too young to play the nurse. And I was kind of tired of like being beholden to other people's visions, right? Like whether or not I worked was dependent on what plays they were doing and what month it was. And so then I started thinking about going to grad school and learning how to take writing seriously and not do it as this thing that I was always just kind of like shadow doing while I was making all this other stuff happen, or trying to make this theater stuff happen. And then I went to grad school when I was 27, and I kept acting until about 5 years ago. And now it's kind of gone. What a long answer to your question.
No, that's wonderful. I like the agency that you took, that you wanted to have more control over the art you were doing, whatever that was, and the writing seemed to give you more control.
Oh yeah, I I think I kind of get in trouble when I say stuff like this, but I feel like they're kind of opposite each other, because when you're an actor, at least when you're doing the kinds of things that I did, you get told what to say and where to stand and who to kiss and what to wear and where, like how the light is going to hit you and how you're going to make your money. And that's fine. I like control. I like that because then there's this cage of controls, and then the only variable is your performance, right? This thing that you can do with all of these walls set up around you, and then the weird sort of nebulous agency that you have where you can slip through the cracks of all those controls and engage with an audience and sort of peek at them from this little cage that you're in. I loved that. And I loved the collaboration of theater, because all those people who are telling you those things, it's not like they're not letting you in. So like you're working on a play with a new playwright, or you have an amazing costume designer or choreographer. I loved solving problems with a group of people. So then you go over to writing, and it's like the opposite. Nobody's telling you anything to do. You're just like all alone with a blank page and like no advice, and it's just you're accountable for everything. Anything is possible. And it's like, so I think that's kind of why I like nonfiction, because at least there are some walls there, right?
Some boundaries.
Yeah, but I definitely overshot it, I think. Like I went from like one extreme to another extreme,
When you were studying with Lee, what were you reading at that time that excited you about possibly taking up that vocation as your primary art?
Nonfiction?
Yeah. Maybe even fiction too, but primarily nonfiction.
Yeah, I've always been really drawn to nonfiction more than anything. I tried to write poetry because I didn't know really what nonfiction was. But the minute I learned about creative nonfiction, I never wanted to do any other genre. So I was reading, I read James Agee's Let Us Now Praise Famous Men with Patsy Sims, who I think she's also been on your show, right? She was really important teacher for me, even though we didn't spend a ton of time together. She was really hard on me and the way that I thought about books, and I thought that was kind of great.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, it was like
in what way?
Like I would in undergrad, those big seminar classes, you just read a book a week and then you meet for 3 hours and talk about them. And usually you'd have to like write like a 1-page thing, and I could just like blow them out like snot rockets, and I'd always get A's on them because I read the book, but I was just sort of it was like book report stuff,
Yeah.
And she would send it back. She'd be like, I don't think that this is what's happening. And, this is a problematic way of looking at this, B-. And I'm like, oh my God. But she's right. So then that's when I started sort of looking at things from a craft perspective, and like in the way that I teach now. I teach at Oregon State University. Like, don't just respond to what's happening, and don't just analyze it like it's The Great Gatsby. Like, think about this as a writer.
Yeah.
And think about these things as choices that are creative and then communicative. And she totally like rode my ass about that. Thank you, Patsy.
Did you study with Leslie Rubinkowski at all?
I don't think she was there when I was there.
Okay.
Rebecca Skloot was in grad school when I was there. So we were in that seminar together, and Lee was there. Bruce Dobler, who was this really kind of fascinating writer who had a couple of novels and then sort of switched over into nonfiction. He's no longer with us, sadly, but he was super special to me. Yeah, so in Patsy's class, we read like James Agee, and I remember that sort of blowing my mind. Somebody gave me John DeGatta's Halls of Fame when I was 22, and I'd never really sort of seen the way that you can use lyric distance to sort of communicate something else. That was very kind of important to me. Ted Conover's New Jack.
Okay, yeah.
Which I've never done anything like that, but like just like seeing how deep he went, and that was a real eye opener.
Yeah, Ted's been on the show too. When
you're kidding?
When Immersion, his book, his guide to immersion journalism, came out a year ago. So we got to talking about that. Yeah, he's kind of a hero of mine too. The way he is just so all in.
Yeah.
And just fully, New Jack's a perfect example. I mean, he did it. He's done it time and time again, made a career out of it.
I didn't know you could do that. I didn't know that you could. I knew George Plimpton could like jokingly play with the Detroit Lions, and I've never done anything past that myself. But like, I didn't know that you could put your whole family and your life on hold and still think clearly enough to actually make a book out of it, or that you could like make those kind of sustained relationships, right, with your subjects. Like I know Eli Saslow was on your program, on your podcast. I guess you don't call them programs. It's like my mom. I don't watch my stories.
In my program.
On your program. But you know, it's the same. Like he seems to be developing these like 6-year relationships with his subjects and slowly getting to a place where he can tell their stories in a way that feels very responsible to him and to them. I had no idea. That was. I mean, that's like acting, right?
Yeah.
Like.
Yeah, I don't know how. I mean, and I've done this to an extent too, because I primarily write longer features, and you always it's weird because you get to know them on such an intimate level, and ultimately you're the one writing their story, and just like Eli said, he's like, this might be the only time they're ever written about, and I have the last word on their story, and so there's a lot of heavy burden.
I bet.
Autumn and also getting that close. It's like it's almost like, how do you have the right distance to write about them? I guess fairly, or even if you have to write about them hard.
Yeah.
And you're trying to coax out information from them over time. Maybe even sharing your own vulnerability, ultimately to kind of like pull that out of them so you can write about it. So it can feel kind of icky. Sometimes, but I think when they see the notebook or the recorder out, they know there's a transaction in a sense going on,
right?
That they're there to be written about, and the writer's there to do a job. Just like Earl Swift, who just wrote this great book, Chesapeake Requiem, where
about the disappearing island,
Tangier.
yeah. Oh.
So when he was just, his notebook was always out, and so eventually that was. Everyone knew that anything, even though he was very friendly with them and forthcoming, they knew that anything they said could be on the record.
Right.
So it's a matter of just being very clear with your intentions and not being like, oh, you said something cool, like, all right, I got to go use the bathroom, and then scribble some notes away. Some people do that to try to blend in more. But he found that blend in, he always had to have the notebook, and eventually. They just like, oh, that's just Earl with the notebook.
Right. Like the reality show cameras. Maybe not nowadays, because I think it's a different game, but back in early reality show days, like Real World 90s, they seem to just eventually forget that they were there. But I don't know. Maybe that's not possible anymore.
Good old Puck.
No, Puck. I wonder if you should have him on.
Yeah, jeez.
He has to have tried to at least write a memoir.
I know.
Is this the first Puck shout out that you've had on your...
The first Puck reference. I think is the first Reality World reference.
Nice.
Yeah.
I don't think Saslow really took you down these roads, so I'm happy to be bringing the quality to the CNF podcast.
I love it. So when you were studying at Pittsburgh and then even going into grad school, what did a successful writer look like to you?
Like not on the page, like as a human person in the world?
Your vision of what it would be like, how it how you saw yourself projecting yourself forward, what you would be satisfied with and consider a success.
I just always imagine being at a Barnes and Noble and like a bunch of people waiting to get the book signed, and like Eli Cash in the Royal Tenenbaums, where I'd like read at a podium and then like ceremoniously close the book, and then everyone would applaud, and I'd be on. I think I really thought that I'd be on or not me, but if I were a successful writer, I would be on like, Jon Stewart or whatever, or Colbert, right? Mm-hmm. Like, of course, authors go on television and talk about their books, but
not in Eugene, Oregon, and
no,
on the Creative Nonfiction podcast.
No, I never imagined. But you know what? Like, this is like I think I just didn't have access. The only other thing that I had access to, if I was trying to imagine a working book writer, as opposed to like a journalist or something, was these people who would come in, like Sandra Cisneros came in to Pitt to talk, and they just seemed like gods to me, who lived these lives that I had no access to. They were so full of they were artists, like they were cutting their own mantle, or I don't know, what is it? Cutting your own image?
Something like that. Like they're anointed in a way, right?
They were walking their own path.
Yeah.
They dressed differently. They held the crowd differently. They talked about these things that took them years to finish. And I had never done anything that took me any amount of time to finish, right? Like I mean, there's no long-term projects when you're 19 or 20 or 21. I know that there's no way that I could imagine what made them who they were. So I think I could only imagine the like reception, like, or something. I don't know. So yeah, both were just entirely wrong. Like none of those things have happened. I also thought that it would be kind of natural to make books.
Yeah.
Like I thought that they had this predilection so that they would just kind of sit down and books would come out of them, like a soft serve machine or something. And then I was like, well, I wrote my first book and I was like, well, that was hard, but now I know how to do it. Now I've made my soft serve machine. And then the second book, it was just like, I had to build a whole new, it was so hard. And now I'm thinking about the third book, and none of the stuff that I previously learned, I'm able to apply to any new project.
Oh, wow.
I
want to put a pin in that for sure. Like the writing that first one and then how it translated or didn't translate to your second one.
A disaster. No, it was not a disaster. I'll try not to be hyperbolic. But.
Yeah. Shoot. So what about so you had some experience with people who did some immersion journalism, traditional journalism. You wrote for some of the alt weeklies, but ultimately what you're making a real name for yourself is with these essays. I would call them reported essays in a lot of ways, deep research.
Oh, yeah.
And what about that particular form of nonfiction appealed to you and allowed you to lean into it?
Well, so they're the books that I read in college that were assigned to me by Patsy and Lee and people like that. And then there were these little discoveries that I had that maybe I didn't see as literary, but that felt like they were me, and those things were like Sassy Magazine, which was this amazing magazine for teenage girls, that it has this great new life on the internet, because the 90s are back, but it's like these sort of 90s fashions and like early feminist, not early, but early third wave feminist thinking. And the writers of Sassy, they appeared every issue and they just talked as themselves and they made fun of themselves and they got mad and they shopped and they read books and they were just like these voices, right? Like in my ear, that when I would see them again, and when the new subscription came, it was like my friends were there. And then Greil Marcus has had this long running column, like 30 or 40 years, that's been in various magazines like The Village Voice, or it was on Salon when I was in college. And now I think, The Believer had it for a while, and maybe Vice has it now, or Vox has it now, called the Real Life Rock and Roll Top 10, where every couple of weeks or so, he just gives like 5 or 10 things that are happening that are making him think about music and culture. And when I read him talking about Sleater-Kinney or a new Elvis documentary or a commercial that used Baba O'Reilly, and the ability to sort of check in with the same brain, thinking hard about all these different things, like those kinds of missives, even though they weren't books, was the slide into maybe what I figured out I could try to do, right? Which is be a person who, again, is not really completing any gigantic, large projects, right? And often isn't really talking to other people, but is like slowly taking itself seriously as it examines something that's happening with all of those people that I used to sort of love being around in high school. People who are making things, people who are trying to figure things out, people who are expressing themselves. And then they're on top of observing them, there's thinking about them as they do it, So I think when I started, and then being an actor, you research a lot. You go in January, you're playing, like a woman on the prairie, and then in March you're playing like a Greek, and then I played a dead cow several times, so then you have to go, or whatever. And I loved going to the library and sort of getting lost, learning about. It made me feel like I was doing a better job as an actor to check out all the books in the library. So it's probably like this fusion of the things that I knew I could reach toward, like those voices, and then the things that I knew that I kind of maybe that felt kind of like theater, like that a way to sort of prepare for the role. Does that make sense? I feel like I'm kind of like half explaining it and half like just like therapizing. This is the problem with when you have to do it in this room. It really does. Now I feel like I should be laying on a couch and telling you about my nonfiction hangups. But yeah, so I think when I started getting fascinated by things, I felt confident that I could articulate my voice thinking about things. And then in order to bolster that or feel sort of more legit, I would go to the library and find cool, fun facts or cool ways of depicting the material and sort of fuse the two together. Yeah. Does that make sense?
Definitely. It lends a layer of, it's not just self-indulgent writing, like you're actually putting some heft behind it by finding research that helps strengthen your argument, but also just add more color into those lines, that it isn't just you and your brain, it's you and your brain with company.
Right. Yeah, I think so. Yeah. I mean, or just to give you license to even try to think. Right now, of course, I know that like all essays are just the product of a working mind on the page, and we should all have the license to do that. But maybe back in the day, I was a little more, and I also figured out pretty quickly that I wasn't particularly great at writing about myself, which was a shocker because I love talking about myself, and like, you know, I talk about myself all the friggin' time, but every time I tried to write about myself, I was pretending too much. It was just there was this version of me that I would make that, it was like a comedian, like, or whatever. So I knew that I wasn't gonna be able to be honest, not honest. I don't think anything's honest, but I think a memoirist has a clarity maybe that I wasn't really able to achieve.
How did you work through those early false starts with trying to find that voice that felt more true to you?
I don't remember. I think I wrote things for like alt weeklies and stuff like that, and I just knew they weren't great, but they also weren't a part of a larger project. I think I just did a lot of kind of apprenticey figuring things out, and then I would meet the deadline and get my $20 paycheck, and it was successful, but I didn't leave with like the interest to try to do exactly that again, versus like, at one point, somebody hired me in Pittsburgh to follow a bunch of urban fishermen around, like people who fish in like the Alcoa plant waters. And I was like getting up at 5 a.m. and going and fishing. And I did like that. And then I really like talking to like fish experts about what's in there and what we can eat and not, and stringing together the scene. Like I liked that. Or like I wrote like a top 10 list about the top 10 lists. And I started thinking about, well, Around the Way Girl by LL Cool J is an amazing list, and a list, like a manifesto list, and I can't remember there's like the 10 Commandments is a pretty sexy list. So like looking at all these different sort of ping pong pockets of culture and then curating them in a way that and I was like, oh, I want to do that again, right? Versus when I wrote some kind of story about how I passed out in an old folks home playing the upright bass, and I was like, that felt weird. I don't want to do that anymore. Or like one time,
so we'll get back to that one too.
Yeah, well, that was like I wrote that for like an alt weekly. Like I was playing the upright bass like Christmas carols in an old folks home, and I passed out and woke up in my training bra in like like an exam room, and I wrote it, and then I thought it was really funny, and then I read it out loud at one of the very first creative nonfiction 412 festivals, and somebody, maybe Lee, came up to me and was like, that is one of the saddest things I have ever read. And I was like, fuck this, man. Like and as I was reading it, I was like, everyone's going to be, I imagine like everybody rolling in the aisles. I think just seeing David Sedaris, like totally wow, a huge crowd in Pittsburgh with his hilarious family stories. And so I had this story that had a training bra and passing out and old people. And I was just ready to like, get my comedy Oscar. And it was just, nobody laughed at any of the laugh lines. And then I thought, oh my God, I'm the worst writer in the world. And my partner, David, who was there, and he was like, Elena, that was the saddest thing. Like nobody was like thinking that the writing was particularly bad, but they did think that it was, that was just a tragic essay on like lonely preteens thinking about death. And I just was like, man, I really have no radar for what I'm doing. So then I went to the library and I haven't left.
Yeah.
Like ever since.
Wow.
Yeah. Wow. I totally forgot about that. Oh,
That is
I feel
amazing.
better. I feel better sharing that with you, Brendan.
Oh, good. Me too. So when you're ready to write an essay, or how do you vet out a story that, what is that sound in your brain that it makes? Like, oh, that's something that it just sticks in your head and it's something you want to go to the library and check out 30 books and read X amount of things. Like what is that like when when something sticks in your brain and it can't let go?
There's like a preliminary thing, right? Some kind of spark.
Yeah.
Like a fact that I read, like there was a tortoise that was 175 years old and belonged to both Charles Darwin and Steve Irwin. And it's just too funny and weird. And also kind of like, I guess, like this training bra passing under the old folks home thing. It's like, I can't tell exactly how to feel about it. I'm fascinated, but I don't know if it's tugging at my heartstrings or my nerd strings or my comedy strings. And that will send me on a pretty deep research dive. But often there's a second moment where I have to abandon the piece if all I'm doing is saying, isn't this cool or this happened?
Okay.
Right.
Yeah.
So there's this like preliminary dating phase where I learn, we take each other, me and the topic take each other out for coffee and, but we're not meeting each other's parents yet. We're going to the ball game or we're not sleeping over. Right.
Yeah. You swiped right. You're like, all right, I can do.
Right. Exactly. Yeah, exactly. It's exactly what
I'm a
it's
little
like.
attracted to you right now.
I never remember because I have been with the same man for like 15 years, what direction the swiping is.
Yep.
And then I bring it up to my students and I'm always afraid that I'm saying the wrong thing. And yeah. Anyway, but yeah, so there's a second moment where it's like, not only is this information grilling my cheese as a human, I can do something with it. And I've lost a lot of them, a lot of projects because I couldn't figure out what I could do with it other than just report. Not that there's anything wrong with just reporting, but because of the nature of what I do, nobody needs you to report what
Yeah. Well, Neil Strauss has this great sort of flow chart of his work. He's like, first draft is for me. Mm-hmm. The second draft is for the reader. And the third draft is for the haters. So like that first self-indulgent draft might be that sort of courtship. This is what I find really exciting. And then the next one would be, okay, let's have a reader in mind. And then that third one, of course, is probably like 10 drafts of each phase. But the third one is, let's lock tight that research so that people coming at it from direction trying to poke holes in it, they can't poke any holes in it.
That's super familiar. That sounds
so. That, like, to me, that kind of echoed what you were saying, that it does have to be in service of something greater than your own curiosity.
Yeah. Does that happen to you when you're doing like your horse book, like the immersion work, the 1, 2, 3 as well? Yeah,
I've kind of adopted that too. That it has to be. I'm not the type of writer that writes in fireworks, that people are just going to read what I have to say. Writes in fireworks. Yeah. I like that. Just because just because we talked about him earlier, like Wallace. Right. People would tune into him because they want to see his pyrotechnics. And it almost didn't matter what he was writing about. For me, I've just had to resign myself to be like, all right, find a good story. And as Glenn Stout, the great editor, author, has told me and has told other people, he's like, don't try to write so hard. Mm-hmm. Just let the story do it. And I've got a good nose for story. So if I can just find the good story and then just tell it in a clear way, then that's the nature of my talent. Mm-hmm. And it's, I've had to resign some ego to that, because you do want to write and have the fireworks burst in the air and have people sort of ooh and ah at you. But, ultimately people just want a good story. And there's so many different ways that people ooh and ah too, right? Yeah. Like, that's why I like this podcast plug, because it's like, you don't talk about just one kind of nonfiction writing. And I feel like it makes me nervous to say anything
about the way that I write or what I value, because I don't want my students or people that are listening to think that applies to all creative nonfiction.
Yeah.
Because when you have, like you had Mary Palan on here, she's talking about a person who's alive, who is thinking things, who's non-neurotypical. She's got a million different responsibilities that have nothing to do with what I do.
Yep.
And her skills are completely different, and people read for those different reasons. We're all under the same umbrella, but what a different sort of stock of aesthetic needs versus, working on an essay collection that thinks about the lyric.
Yeah, or like or filmmakers too. It's great to talk to them, because ultimately we're all telling true stories in some. But it's like, what palette are you working with? There's some great overlap, and I think there's so much that the straight up narrative journalists, reporters can learn from the art you're making, and vice versa. And because just speaking personally, like I'm a weak reporter. I'm a better writer than a reporter. So having just like hardened journalists that they covered crime, and they can teach you so much about the nuts and bolts of reporting. And then you can talk to people like you, or I'm thinking Nikki Shulak or Andre Debus, who are brilliant writers that can then maybe learn some of those repertorial skills, and then it just makes their storytelling better. So you can kind of add this to your cart, and then check out with a new set of skills.
That's why I think we're really lucky in terms of the genre. We're a weird, motley kind of redheaded stepchild. Nothing against redheads or stepchildren. I love both. But it does sort of feel like there's an add to cart, sort of dim sum, and these wonderful. At the MFA program where I teach, I want to make those rooms for workshops. So when we do a national search for writers to come in, and I always want a kind of a who are the people in your neighborhood of nonfiction. So we have like a wine writer and a lyric essayist who has a BFA and straight out of undergrad, and somebody who worked a beat, the Mobile, Alabama education beat, who's just trying to figure out now like how to become Tom Junot or whatever.
Yeah.
When different types of people are in that room together, instead of trying to develop a single language, they just start stealing from each other. Their work starts looking like each other's work, and then they stay in touch after they leave. And I just hope that in the future, that's kind of there. It's all like your podcast, like it's everyone sort of understands, not that there's one way to do it or there's one way to define it, but that a reporter and a lyric essayist actually have some overlap, right?
Yeah.
Like those 3 drafts that you were talking about, that's identical to what I do. And I don't, my haters are very different from the kind of haters who would respond to a book about white supremacy, or, like I have art haters.
Yeah.
It's not the same.
What would you say as a writer, and as someone as talented and hardworking as you are, like, what do you struggle with?
Oh gosh. Well, kind of everything. I have a lot of procrastination, or it feels like it should be called something more than procrastination, like crippling inability to make an easy sort of smooth process for myself, which involves laziness and self-doubt and a kind of indulgence of a really circular process. So only one of those things would probably be considered acceptable, and the other 2 are kind of, deplorable or whatever.
How does your procrastination manifest itself?
It depends on where, sometimes I just get hung up on a thing, and then I don't want to deal with the thing, so I get hung up on addressing a certain problem in the draft, or I get hung up on getting started, or developing a pitch for myself, and then I just think myself into circles, and then I don't do anything. But and I'm always, when I finish something, I marvel at the fact that it actually got done. Like I black out for a little while there, and then all of a sudden I have an essay, which doesn't make me a great guest. Yeah. I don't know if is that kind of what you were looking for, or like what do I hate about myself as a writer? I'm not great at writing personally. And I'm learning, like, just like you said, how to be. I think one of the reasons that I've got so many library books in the hopper, where I've been to the library rather than out into the world talking to people that are alive, is because I'm still sharpening my it's not just interview skills. It's like you said, it's like reporting skills.
Yeah.
Right. I think I can interview okay.
Yeah.
Like if I need to talk to somebody and get information, or there's a lot of quotes in my first book. I did all these kind of Anna Devere Smith style monologues where I would sit with an auctioneer for 4 hours and have them tell me stories, and then I would distill that into like one story that I put in between the essays of my essays. But that's not the same thing as reportage. Like,
yeah.
I think I could really learn, or I'm trying to learn how to do that.
Yeah, I have down here, I've got.
This is a big bookshelf, by the way. Radio land people, podcast land people.
Yeah. And I get rid of so many, I donate so many of my books too to friends. That whole pile right there is just, that's going to be donated. Those are library books, but that pile there is.
Don't donate those.
Yeah, I know. But there's Investigative Reporter's Handbook. Because, like I said, I'm a shitty reporter, so I've got to read this. Then NPR, sound reporting.
Oh, yeah.
And then, actually, this one, I haven't read this yet, but I think there's probably some good tactics in it. The Private Investigator's Handbook. The do-it-yourself guide to protect yourself, get justice, or get even.
What does it say? Discover infidelity, locate missing persons, uncover financial fraud, and more.
Yeah, collect and use evidence. To me, that kind of sounds like being a reporter.
I want to assign that for my students.
Yeah.
Discover infidelity, students.
Yeah. So, but I don't know where we were going. Oh yeah, you were saying that having developing sort of reporter chops. Mm-hmm. I think that can only help matters and strengthen everything you do. But I wonder too, like where do you feel most alive in the process? Like the generative phase or that rewriting phase?
Researching and rewriting. Mm-hmm. Researching is like the KB Toys Super Toy Run. I mean, it's just, I love it so much, and I love developing a system of responding to the research with enthusiasm, which it's like note taking, but it's like emotional note taking. Yeah. And I like to research kind of in a spider web way, where I look at one thing, and then if I want to go in another direction, I put a pin and go down that direction, like wormholey, and then I have to find a kind of system of like physical note taking to represent all of it, so I can think about all the things at once. And I just love it. It's really overwhelming, but it just makes me feel so like not lonely, like. And then editing, I love once I have the material kind of down, and all I have to do is listen to it and find a way to shape it into the way that it needs to be, that just that little bit of guidance. I think it's like I have a script, Mm-hmm. That's great. But generating it just tears the ass out of me, man. It takes forever. I suck at it. I never have fun. The only time I ever had fun drafting an essay was, you should get in on this, by the way. There's this thing that essayists do on Twitter.
Okay.
March Madness, right?
Yeah.
Every year we pick a kind of subgenre of music, and we have a bracket of songs that represent that subgenre. Everybody writes an essay about one of them, and then people all over the world vote as we winnow it down.
Really?
So the first year it was March Sadness. We tried to figure out what the saddest song was. Then it was March Fadness, which is one-hit wonders from the 90s. And I listened to Return of the Mac for 24 straight hours.
Oh, my God.
I know, it was a bad choice. Last year it was March Shredness. And I had to write about, it was like hair metal. Okay. But then they gave me Pour Some Sugar on Me, which I say doesn't shred, right? There's not even a guitar solo in it, really.
No, it's just some chunky power chords and a very simple 4/4,
right?
Yeah,
and no, it's like arena rock.
Yeah,
I love it. I think it's a beautiful song, and so I had so much fun writing. It was for free on the internet for my friends, but everybody wants to sort of show their chops, so it's not like you just write these one-off things. Like, people take the essays really seriously. My friend Steve Church, he wrote like a novella about Dokken, right? So we're taking it seriously, but still, like, I just was taking down Pour Some Sugar on Me, but also writing about what I loved about it. And it was like, I felt like a piano player. That is what I imagined writing was going to be like when I was a kid, is like,
Okay.
you know, you just roll up your sleeves and it's like, and just, you know, and David, my partner, would come upstairs and I'd be like, this is so fun. And he's like, your body posture is totally different. It was just so great.
Yeah.
And he was like, why don't you try to write more like that, so that, you know, my marriage won't be so shitty to you or whatever. No. But no, for the other than that, that's literally the only time that generating anything has been. Well, no, the other time was when I wrote the Coco in the Animal Strike Curious Poses. I wrote the sign language gorilla telling that old dirty joke, the aristocrats.
Yeah.
But I had all of the material was already there, because the rule that I set for myself was Coco the sign language gorilla can only tell the aristocrats joke using the lexicon that we know she had. So there are these scientific reports that talk about the kinds of words and word pairings that she would do, her sort of syntactical tendencies.
Yeah.
And so I just printed them all up on a huge, size of a dining room table thing. And I just walk past it over the course of the day and pull out things that I could use for sex acts to describe in the aristocrats, or like looking for the way that she would be able to say the aristocrats, which it turned into we wonderful snob people.
Yeah.
That was fun.
Yeah.
But that's not really writing. That's more like a word game. So maybe that doesn't count. Anyway, I hate generating content. The end.
Yeah. So what do you think changed between your first book and your second book? And, what did you learn from the first one that carried over to this one, which has gotten such great praise and I think, widespread and deserved attention?
Well, thank you. I think I got into the idea, or I wanted to dig deeper into the idea of the essay collection as the essay. You know what I mean? Like, so rather than... Well, I mean, like there's like Pulphead, right? Like John Jeremiah Sullivan, where he wrote those essays on assignment for different magazines, and then he edited them a little bit, but put them together as kind of a collection of work that, Susan Orlean, Bullfighter Checks Her Makeup, same thing.
Yep.
And then there's like, I'm going to write a bunch of essays that are about the same topic, like empathy exams, or my first book, right? Where it's just like, I'm going to think about the human voice deeply and seriously for several years and write 15 essays and group them in some way that's meaningful to me, but really like they're discrete enterprises. Rather than any of that, the big essay is the book, right? The way that it begins and moves forward and ends is a kind of an argument that is determined over the course of thinking deeply about animals for 6 years. It's like a concept album versus an album of songs that, don't seem like they were necessarily recorded in the same, right? It's like, I'm trying to think in Metallica terms, if they have like a singles heavy album versus a concept album, like is Ride the Lightning more, like...
I think those early albums were designed to go from, say, beginning to end. They play off each other. You citing Ride the Lightning, Fight Fire with Fire comes out the gate. Title track, For Whom the Bell Tolls. Then To Fade to Black, their first ballad, so slow it down. Then Thrash with Trapped Under Ice. Escape. They wrote that. They were embarrassed by it as like a radio single. They hate that song.
Oh, you're kidding.
Yeah. And then they go into, Creeping Death was just a big stadium anthem for them. And then Call of Cthulhu, their big instrumental it's just a big, bold song with no lyrics at all and ends with, the drums and the chords all coming together to awaken the beast. And someone that they echo that Cthulhu, the H.P. Lovecraft story. They do it in a thing that should not be. And then on their latest record, their Dream No More, which is the Cthulhu Awakening. So yeah, they always they harken back to the same monster.
Oh damn!
Yeah, it's gone on for like 25 years.
Some kind of monster, right?
Oh yeah, there's that one too. Jeez,
but no, what you bring up something else that I really the difference between the first and the second book. I think both the idea of the book as an essay and this other thing were sort of present in the first project, but I just decided to like lean on them, like put my foot on the gas of them. it's kind of what you were saying with Ride the Lightning. Within that album, like, it sounds like you're talking about this beautiful pacing, right? That sort of like moves you through an experience. And that's this first thing that I'm saying, that
and it's a pretty death themed record,
right?
Too, where I would say, you're getting to like a singles heavy. I would say like their Black album is more singles,
right.
Enter Sandman, Sad But True, Holier Than Thou, Unforgiven. Yeah, like there's nothing that binds them the way that Master of Puppets or Ride the Lightning.
That's
binds.
mine. Master of Puppets
That's
is mine.
my favorite too. Yeah.
When was Cliff's last album?
Puppets.
Yeah. But so this other thing that you're talking about, where like there's an instrumental, there's a stadium rocker, there's an illusion album, there's the attempt to go pop. I really wanted to make a book that did that too. And I think it meets some resistance. I think because people are like, I want it all to be like Chikulu, or however you say that, right?
Yeah.
Or I want all of the essays to be like the magaziniest essay that I wrote. Or why can't you just have a bunch of insane, there's a book where a sign language gorilla tells an X-rated joke, and there's a book where you can sell your essay about the first North American female in space being a spider to the Oxford American. But rarely do books allow for that kind of swing, right?
Yeah.
But music albums all the time do that. My favorite example of that is Prince's Sign of the Times, or maybe Henry Nilsson's Nilsson Schmilsson, where like part of the enjoyment of the art piece is all the crazy different kinds of backflips that the band or the writer can do, right?
Yeah.
I really wanted this book to do that in a way that maybe almost went too far. If I do anything, I always do it too far. Like that's I think my MO for most things, but just maybe pushed it to the point where it would be a little jarring.
Yeah. Did you intend for your book to be read beginning to end, or did you like to hit the shuffle button on it?
The first book, I think I resigned myself to shuffle button, but this one, I don't care how anybody reads it. I don't care if you don't read it, just like if you want to pretend that you read it, that's fine. But, in my brain, when I read it from beginning to end.
Okay. So when you're writing these, the essays of this nature that are so deeply researched, how do you get momentum to a piece and not feel and keep momentum going throughout the course of the whole work? Because there is that element of you start one and you finish, and then you got to ramp up again. And how do you ride those energy waves?
How do I ride that lightning?
How do you ride that lightning?
of putting the whole book together, not it within the essay, but how to keep the overall project going.
Yeah.
I found that the project asks you to work and to motivate yourself in different ways as it goes along. So in the beginning, when you're just trying to figure out, like, is this an album, right? Is this a thing? You're just writing a couple of pieces. Like I wrote the first piece that I wrote. I just wrote it because I was writing something. I wasn't like, and chapter 1, right? And when it was done, I looked at it and I was like, there's something about this that feels very sustainable to me. And then I asked myself, what is it? What are the components of this that I could replicate? And I realized that it was about an animal who was famous, who had a name. So then I just tried to find another one. And I tried to do the same thing. And then I compared those two and made kind of a description that I could carry on to the third essay. Once I got about that far, then I could make a table of contents almost for myself. Sort of go and research and sort of date a bunch of potential candidates and make a table of contents. Half of the subjects aren't anywhere near the book, but I just made this list. So then that was like a second kind of motivation or push, is to just sort of start looking around, picking off from that list and trying to make an essay that responds to the first 3 or the first 4 or the first 5, but also pushes it to another place. Once you have about 6 or 7 essays, then the book starts telling you what it is. The book goes, oh wait, this isn't a book about animals at all. This is a book about people. So now when you look, you need to make sure that these animals or allow you to say things about humans that you haven't been able to say before. Or, oh, this is the map of a consciousness of how humans have been looking at animals over 40,000 years. So, or over a number of years. So you need to arrange it chronologically. Oh, this book, I think like around the fourth essay, I learned about this thing called the bestiary or the bestiary, which is this medieval kind of encyclopedia of animals, usually made by monks that had never even seen half of the animals that they were talking about. So it was full of conjecture and imagination, which is kind of the way that I think my nonfiction is. There's like hard facts about the animals, and then there's the imagination of the people that are around it. So when I learned about the bestiaries and I wanted to use that as sort of a model for the book, then I needed to have an essay that helped explain to the reader that this was happening, because this is all implicit work, right? So I couldn't just be like, hello, everyone, this is my bestiary, right? So I had to have an essay relatively early in the book that talks about what a bestiary is. So hopefully that argument will sort of project itself. Then there's a stage where you're like, so that's a totally different kind of motivation, right? It's like a little challenge. And then you're like, holy shit, these are all furry quadrupeds. I need to get some invertebrates up in here. So then you just start Googling like famous reptiles, and so then the book is asking you to diversify in that way. And finally, when you have the majority of the piece together and you know kind of what the argument is, it's just like putting together a research paper. There are just a couple of planks in the development that you haven't quite addressed. And so the finishing touches are you making sure that you've engaged that plank in the argument. So I realized really, really late in the game that there was no way that I could talk about these 40,000 years of people doing all these things to animals without implicating myself, because I'm no Jane Goodall. I don't, like we talked about before, I don't like to go outside, I'm a representative of a culture that compromises animals in a million different ways. And as much as I hate writing personally, or don't feel confident writing personally, I've got to go and try to represent myself here.
Yeah.
Because that's the plank in the argument that was missing. Nobody was, I don't think, if the reader that I'm imagining in my head isn't real, because it's kind of just me. But
that's your ideal reader is
no, it's certainly not my idea. No, but like, I don't like imagine my mother reading this book. I think it's too convoluted a process for me to like, and I would never ask someone to read the book the way that I want the book to be read, because it is still a collection of essays that you can dip into before bed and be like, oh, this one's only a few pages long. That's how drunk I am. I'll read that. That's fine. But but in my brain, I knew that there was like a missing piece of that logic of what I wanted the ideal reader to, how I wanted them to surf the wave of the book. And so then it's almost like a check or a shopping list or something, like it's almost there. It's almost like a role in a play where the script and everything's written and all you have to do is just kind of perform it.
Yeah.
Right. So yeah, that's all of that long thing is to say that those are very different requirements. And so the motivation level to keep going is fueled by the diversity of asks, if that makes sense.
Yeah, like so much of what you're saying, I remember when Mary Carr was on and talking about her latest book of poetry, and it got to this question of tracking, like where is one going to slide in versus the other. Even Earl Swift, when for his latest book, he talked about proportionality.
Oh, cool.
Mapping things out so each chapter felt nicely weighted and not too bogged down by history, or he had to keep his various threads very even. Susan, same thing. She for her latest book, the library book, she had a lot of her notes, her story blocks on 5x7 index cards, and she would have various piles on a big table, and she'd be like, well, this one's got 30 cards, this one has 5, and she could see that I got to start moving things around. In that sense, the book was telling her where to put things. So that's kind of sounds like what your research was saying. Like, oh yeah, we need some invertebrates up in here, and going. I like that you were listening to the book. The book was trying to tell you something.
Oh yeah, I think and that's what I think. A lot of the groundwork that you lay in the beginning of a project is to get to a place where you trust that eventually. Like I'm really stalled right now trying to figure out a third book, Confession. And I think it's because I haven't felt that sense of trust that I felt when I finished the second or third essay, that no matter, and I doubted myself the whole time I was putting the book together, but really deep down, I knew that the project at least, or the subject at least, would give me, if I could take what they gave me, I would have ample opportunities to keep going. You know, it would start I would be able, if I kept at it, to have a project that would start dictating to me what would happen. I was pretty confident about that really early on in both books. And I think that's why I haven't been able to really pull the trigger on what the third project's going to be, because I'm not feeling that trust, that sort of spidey sense, you know, that eventually it's going to be able to talk to me as much as I talk to it.
Right.
Yeah.
So how do you set up your days when you're in the throes of trying to write this book, and you've got your teaching load as well? So how do you orchestrate your day to
I'm trying to get better at it. Every it's like fitness. You know, every time school's out, I'm like, I'm going to work out every day. I'm going to do yoga in the morning, cardio at night. And then I do, and I'm like, God, I'm so good at this. I'm amazing at yoga and cardio. I'm the Rock. I'm going to jump from one building to another building or whatever. And then the world starts, and all of a sudden it's like, well, the one thing I can cut for my day is yoga or whatever, or, you know, cardio is, panic attacks are my new cardio or whatever. It's the same with writing. Every summer I try to develop a really sensible practice. And then once I get busy with this job, it sort of goes out the window. So then I just set little goals for myself to just keep on nodding terms, to quote Joe Didion, with writing until I can find the space to really hammer down on a project. But when I'm in the throes of a project, when I'm in it, when I'm there and it's all on the walls and all the books, I just sort of sacrifice a lot of time, and I hope my boss doesn't hear that, a lot of professional material to move forward. But the little upkeep day to day, I've never been able to get good at. Yeah. I don't write every day or anything like that.
Okay. Yeah, that's what I was kind of wondering, if that was part of your process. Even if you're in the middle of the project, do you make sure you get 100 words down, or if you had a limit, or 45 minutes in the chair every morning or something?
No, I think it would be better if I did. I think one of the reasons that I have this procrastinating thing is because I've given myself only spaces where I can work hard and with this kind of tunnel vision. So even if it's like during a work week, it's like, okay, well, I don't teach Friday, and Saturday and Sunday I have a do not disturb sign, and I'll just like ask David to slide grilled cheese sandwiches under the door. I won't go out. You know, I don't have kids or anything. I have cats. They can feed themselves. You know, we live in a yard with a lot of snakes. They eat snakes. So, but I think, so then when I have an issue, I'll procrastinate, because one of the things that I'll say is, I don't have this ocean of focus and time to devote to it. Whereas if I just kind of nonchalantly checked in with myself as a writer every day, if there was a problem, I'd be like, you know what, you just have to do what you usually do. Just sit down, and it's just like with fitness, you know, just sit down and just run through the things, and then the endorphins would kick in, and I realized it wasn't so scary. But
it's like sometimes going to the gym, the hardest part is just getting to the gym,
putting your shoes on, just
getting there.
Actually, walking in the door of the gym, because sometimes I drive to the gym, and if I can't find a place to park, I just drive right out. Totally. I think too, you know, I'm starting to think a little bit more about writing personally. I think maybe I've been thinking about some ideas where I would have to sort of think hard about my life, and I really regret not just checking in with myself as a person in writing.
Do you journal at all?
Not consistently. The one time in my life, David bought me a Polaroid camera. It's like 2004.
That's cool.
And I took a Polaroid every day because I couldn't get myself to write every day. So I was like, you know what? All you have to do is take one Polaroid and write one sentence every day. And I taped the Polaroids and the sentences in this composition book. And I remember that. I think I did it for about 9 or 10 months. I remember that period in my life, it was 2004, more clearly than anything of the past 14 years. I remember it so, and it was just one image and one sentence. So if I wanted to write a memoir at this point, I would only be able to write a memoir about 9 months in 2003.
Yeah.
But I can only assume that if you were sort of thinking about yourself as a writer, thinking about yourself, not thinking about yourself as a professional writer, but using the tools as a writer to think about yourself every day, you would have that kind of access to self
Yeah,
that would allow you to write about yourself more.
definitely. I've kept a journal since I was 16. So,
You're kidding.
So I've got probably 25 pretty thick journals that are, so like 21 years worth of, 22 years worth of them.
How often are you checking
Just
in?
about every day.
And
Yeah.
how much are you writing?
The last 5 years has been much more volume intense.
Okay.
But before then it was, I kind of did the math on the entries that it's basically been an average of one every 2.5 to 3 days for the last 22 years.
Wow.
So there's a great record of my high school years, which plays well into the baseball book that I've been, trying to finish.
A personal.
Yeah. It's a memoir of my father in baseball. And
Oh, right. And I saw that on your website in
Yeah.
segments, right? Like it's going to be segmented, not a straight through book.
yeah, the one thread is me watching my father play ball at a senior slow pitch softball tournament.
Oh, cool.
And then the other thread is just our history through sport, him kind of living vicariously through me, and how baseball like bonded us and then broke us when I was cut and didn't transfer and didn't keep going, even though I could have. I was burned out. And then how ultimately, like 10 years after I was cut, and then I watched those guys go out and win their tournament, and then I saw how much fun they had and how much fun I wasn't having when I was playing. Even though I had every reason to have fun, I was good. I was on good teams, and I hated it. I just was so fried. And then I saw how much fun they were having. Like, you know what? Maybe my best way to reconcile the bitter end of my career is to go out and play again. So this was in upstate New York, and I hooked up with a 30 and over wood bat league and played again, had fun. And all of a sudden, like, my dad's calling me like every other day. And when we would go for 6 months without talking.
Oh my God.
And so I'm like, oh, light bulb. And it was just, sport was our language,
Yeah.
and our commonality. So the story just kind of spins on those axes.
Oh my God, I can smell that book. It's like it's in the room already. And then are the journals helpful for
yeah.
putting? Because you're honest with yourself in your journals, or
Yeah.
enough, or you can see through your dishonesty.
Yeah. Yeah. And I am just an insecure person by nature. And that's just especially heightened when I was in high school.
Yeah.
And so there's a very significant, catalog of those feelings through there when I had every reason to be very confident and I wasn't, good in school, good in sports, and I was just had a shit brain. And so, and so that's, I'm working with Glenn on that to try to get it packaged in such a way. I mean, the thing's been technically done in a sense for a while,
Right.
but I'm trying to get it to a point where doesn't sound overwritten.
Yeah.
And the tone of it, because sometimes I come in and try to be too funny, and Glenn is just like, stop it. He's
Right.
like, this isn't true. You're trying too hard. Stop trying to write the story. Let the story write the story. He words it better, but those are the wrinkles that I'm ironing over.
And then you just sort of like excise whatever that is and just sort of like step back a few paces and then take a running start at doing it a little bit differently, and then you patch that back into the manuscript.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, a lot of that. And he notices where things are really thin. Like, I need to talk to my sister and my mom, a bit more, just to fill in some holes. I think my dad's been critical about it. He's a tough nut to crack. Irish Catholic guy, grew up outside of Boston.
Whoa.
These guys don't talk.
Yeah, wow.
You know what I mean?
I think I've seen 7 or 8 movies about that.
Yeah, that's him. There he is. So Glenn's giving me some cool workarounds for that too. You could say like, well, this is just the way things were, or you can try to or you can try to write a novel, or or
Is that a workaround?
yeah.
I don't know.
I'm like, oh,
That's a too much workaround.
Yeah.
Do you think this is completely not related? But do you think American baseball, is somehow connected to the type of person who is withholding about things? Do you think there's a connection between the two, like the way that the game is, the way that it's played, or the way that I'm thinking about like like all these, like the Universal Baseball Society, the Robert Coover book about this man who kind of lives this quiet, like Walter Mitty life and has invented this fantasy league that he plays just for himself with his, or whatever. And then I'm thinking about like Field of Dreams and all that stuff too.
Well, baseball lends itself, and I wrote a paper about this in a literary journalism class when I was an undergrad. That it was baseball as literary journalism, and Roger Angel, the great New Yorker writer, where is Game Time? I've got it up here. Here's Game, all this baseball writing, and so it lends. There's so much time between innings, and it's I'd argue that football might be more cerebral at this point. The way they strategize in football, and it's so fast too. So it's almost like speed chess.
Yeah,
they can game plan as much as they want, but I mean, you've got 40 seconds between plays, and it's like bang, 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 bang.
Right.
Baseball is a bit more methodical and allows for deeper thought, and I think it allows for deeper writing.
It seems like people don't touch each other as much in baseball. I mean, I know there's touching.
Yeah.
But that reserve seems, like basketball, you can hear their bodies even if you're watching it because you're in that little arena, and football is very much obviously a contact sport. Baseball feels like you have this bat that's like an extension of yourself, and someone from very far away throws another inanimate object at you.
Yeah, so many other... What makes it kind of a sport that lends itself to that feels quieter about it is that there's no whistles, there's no clock.
Oh yeah, just that organ.
Yeah, burn, 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 burn. Like that was the Fenway Park one. Now they're probably just jamming some Drake or something.
Right.
But,
in my feelings.
Yeah. But also, it's the only sport where the offense does not have the ball. Too, the defense has the ball. So you know what I mean? Like it just has these little quirks to it that lend itself to, I don't know, just deeper thought. And
totally. Oh wow! And you're so vulnerable. I guess you're even more vulnerable in basketball, but there's not bats in basketball.
Yeah, and with baseball, it's unique in the sense that it's a team sport, but it's very individualistic too. It's the pitcher versus the hitter,
right?
And
right.
Yeah, and then there are definitely team strategies, but ultimately there is this one-on-one thing that happens every single play. So I don't know how we got onto that. The journals kind of led to all this.
There's just so many nonfiction writers that played sports, and as we're talking, I think a lot of them it's baseball, right? Like Justin, my colleague, he was a baseball player, if I'm not mistaken. Where he writes about playing baseball in his book, Son of a Gun, which is really good. I don't know. I think I like to overanalyze in completely pop psychology ways, things that I have no business analyzing, but there is sort of this weird, and it is America's pastime, but it feels so guarded in a way and isolating.
There's unwritten rules. There's a book this thick of unwritten rules.
Is that
so
true?
Forth. Yeah. Yeah, just the way retaliations, throwing at players, and putting a ball in their ear. It can get a little nasty.
Did you see that documentary that the Wild Wild Country guys did about the Oregon baseball team?
No.
What's
the name of it?
I don't remember. But the Wild Wild Country documentary.
I
right?
don't.
Oh
no.
Man. Okay, so you got to have them on. They're awesome.
Okay.
I feel like I don't have to say this in the microphone. You're gonna air this. It's this Netflix documentary. It just won the Emmy for Best Documentary about America's largest biochemical warfare attack happened in Oregon, and it was propagated by a cult, or they wouldn't refer to themselves as a cult, but a religious society that lived up in like Antelope, above the Dalles. And it was in the 80s. They were called the Rajneeshpuran, and they all wore red. And so they took over this town that had been just run by kind of cowboys. And it is totally well archived. So there's all this like 80s news footage of this. It's called this place, Rajneeshpuran, and then things get really crazy. So the two documentarians that made that, the first thing that they made was about this Oregon minor league baseball team that was run, I think, by their uncle.
Okay.
And the Oregon Historical Society helped them with it. It's awesome.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, they would. You should totally have them on.
Yeah.
I think they're related to Kurt Russell, maybe somehow.
Wow.
We had them on the Live Wire show. And
cool.
They were great to talk to.
You've referenced self-doubt a lot. It's, how do you deal with that?
That's going to be on my tombstone.
Yeah.
How do I deal with self-doubt?
Yeah.
Do you think it's possible to have a lot of self-doubt but still be ambitious?
I think it's possible to have a lot of self-doubt and be ambitious and be confident too. You know, I think I don't know. Maybe not. I mean, I'm one who's mired in a black blanket of self-doubt. So
this is what happens when you invite people over your house, man, versus talking to them over the phone. We're just really gay.
Yeah.
It's just gay.
Well, I think the in-person thing, there's an energy too that allows the conversation to feel shorter than it is too, and there's a momentum that happens. I think I can sense when people are glazing over on the phone too. I swear, all right, we're up on an hour. I'll keep you for a little while longer, and here we are, up over, well over, and it's almost 90 minutes.
You're kidding. Yeah. So I think I'm ambitious. I think I'm a very ambitious person about certain things, not all things, not fitness. And I think that's the thing. I have a lot of self-doubt. I convince myself sometimes that things that actually happened that are good haven't happened at all, real bad. But I think even if I have that self-doubt to that extent, my interest in meeting these kind of goals that I think I associate with being an actualized person or being real, right? Having not I want my book to do well, but I want to finish this, or I want to achieve the thing that I go on off at the mouth about nonfiction, right? I want to. That those are the kind of the two things, right? I yell a lot as a teacher about things that I think nonfiction can do, and things that I want it to do, and things that people who want to make art maybe should consider, and those things I want to prove, right? And then I want to finish something, and this is the only thing that I've ever finished is books. I've never finished anything else. I've never been married. I've never had children. I guess I got a college degree, but that doesn't really count.
Yeah. Well, those things you versus, but how hungry are you to be the writer of several books, and maybe maybe this is more satisfying in a sense.
Yeah. I don't want to write 1 million books, but when I get an idea for a book that I know I could do if I was a little bit better than I am, then that's the thing, right? Mm-hmm. And for the second book, I started out kind of tricking myself and going just get a book that'll get you tenure. I thought about this little cute kind of occasional essays about animals where I do the research and it's really fun, and there's 40 of them rather than 15, and it's just this delightful book that your grandma might read. It's just full of this, and then but once I get in on it, I just couldn't let myself work like that. The first essay that I wrote, I was like, you know what, I think this really needs to be an iambic pentameter. So and then the shape of this thing, this way of thinking, and this way of sort of making the essay do what I wanted to do kind of took over. Yeah. So even when I try to set a different kind of course, I think that book would have been infinitely more successful. So it would have played to a kind of ambition that I don't think I have. I do love knowing. I love believing that. I don't know how to say this without sounding cocky. I don't feel cocky at all. I think my book could be considered completely useless, right? But and that's. But so can paintings, so plays. Yeah. I'm an actor. We would work for 3 weeks, 12 hours a day, and ruining our relationships and, whatever, just to make this thing that 600 people see over the course of a 4-week run, and then it dissipates and it never exists again. Right. So, I don't mind the idea of, I don't want to make something that lasts, I don't mind that all of my shit is going to turn to dust. It's fine. But in a finite space of time, I want people to see that I challenged myself to do something and it's a challenge that only I even know how to make, you know, like it's not
Yeah.
like a script or something. It's like I set this ridiculous challenge for myself that nobody else cares about, and then I do it. You know, that's the thing. So it's like self prescription, self ambition, and self doubt.
Yeah.
It sounds so narcissistic, actually, now that I think about it. But at least it doesn't involve anybody else, so nobody has to deal with it. Like that, it's all, you know.
A lot of people have a hard time finishing things. It seems like that's kind of your that's the this sounds stupid, but like that's the goal. Like some people will find every reason not to finish something. They'll be in the ugly middle of this, and then they'll be like, there's something shinier over here. I'd rather start something
I can't
new.
do that.
You get in and sink your teeth in, and you're not going to write the next book until you finish.
I don't have the bandwidth to do that.
Yeah.
I mean, like when I eat a plate that has steak and mashed potatoes and green beans on it, I can't eat. I eat one and then the other and then the other, and I can't write 2 essays at once. I have a really hard time teaching and writing. I'm an Aries. You know, we're not able to sort of like scope the landscape. We don't have that bandwidth, right?
Yeah.
What are you? When's your birthday?
July 1st.
Oh, you're Cancer.
Yeah.
Oh, Cancers are good. Cancers have a lot of feelings, though, but they're very loyal, very, very loyal. And yeah. Oh, cool. That's great.
Does that make sense in our limited interactions?
Yeah, I mean, I think cancers are not. I don't know. I mean, I the only cancers I can think of right now are men, and they all are men, and they all played baseball.
Oh boy.
But yeah, they're not like effusive, but they're warm and friendly, and you know, but they're not like they don't perform. Cancers don't perform care; they just care.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
It's like the difference between like somebody from maybe New England and a Southerner. Southerners sometimes perform care.
Ah, yeah.
But if you're from New York and you care about someone, you just quietly fucking care about them and then yell at them or whatever people from New York do.
Yeah, or you see the leaky faucet and you just go and fix it.
You just fix it.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And you don't go, oh my God, I'm just coming over here. What are you doing? It's so nice. Oh, look at this. Hey, come over here and watch me fix. No, like they don't do that. It doesn't seem like I've been to Boston twice, so I don't know if I should say that about a place that I've only visited twice. I had a great time. Paper Cuts Bookstore in Jamaica Plain. They're awesome.
What's been your experience with this latest book, and what has been your great takeaway of having gone through this and finished this? How has this built you up to the point where you are now?
The making of it, or the reception, or the release, or the...
Yeah, I guess just the making of it. How has this made you better for book 3? You know, what did the carryover and the momentum that you're feeling from this? You know, what are you then sort of excited about for the next one?
Well, like I said, I forgot everything it's just like ground fucking zero again. But I think it was a more ambitious undertaking than the first one, so maybe that's like, okay, then maybe you should be a little more ambitious this time,
maybe more personal with the third one.
Yeah, right. Like that's scary. I mean, that may not work. I'll just be coming and talking to you in 5 years about my book it's like, I don't know, like famous beans in history or something.
We'll just have you on the show every 6 months, and your third book will be just this running transcript of our conversation.
Yes. There we go. That sounds so good. I wouldn't have to do anything. I could get tenure. It'd be great. Yeah, I think that's probably the main thing is like, I do trust that setting a high bar is a thing, you know, that I could do, I guess. I think some of the things that are kind of not wrong, but that I wish I had done differently in the book, I really want to get right this time. Like I researched the book, and the book is full of research, but I think there's an even better and more responsible is not the right word, but more maybe accountable way of doing the research, or thinking about research, or using the research to motivate material. And I'm ready to do that too. You know, I'm not saying that the book is full of lies, but
right. No, but I think there's over 250 sources that you use to write these essays, and that's not necessarily something I've associated with essays. Sometimes I always feel like it's more like Sedaris, which is just like when I think of an essay, I think of, oh yeah, that, his performative piece is based almost solely on memory, which isn't
Right.
always true. He does some research here and there, but like yours are really, really grounded in that research. And it's something that can be really hard, not to get lost in the weeds of research.
Well, yeah.
So how did you, as someone who loves the library and doing that, how did you not get lost in the research and actually get down to brass tacks and get down to the writing?
Well, there was definitely plenty of time where I should have stopped researching. Like 100% admit that I was using it as opportunities to not write.
Yeah.
But the cool thing is that eventually the writing project is just like not tapping you in the shoulder so hard that you have to abandon the wormholes and get started. And usually it's because of something that you uncover in the research, right? Like when I learned that I was trying to figure out what cat I wanted to write about. I only let myself write about one species for the most part, per one. I couldn't have two dogs or two cats or whatever. And I learned about this really famous cat poem that somebody had told me about when I was like 27. It's actually missing its entire left-hand side.
Uh-huh.
And so I was researching the world of this man when he wrote this poem in the mid 18th century, and what it was like, how people treated cats then, which is really sad, and the superstitions about cats in London and the publishing industry. This guy was big in the sort of I can't remember the name of the street. It was this like 1780s writing when there were a lot of newspapers and periodicals, sort of like Samuel Johnson time, right? Yep. I was just totally loving taking out shelves of books in the library and reading about the Great Fire and who was queen, whatever. But then when I learned that this poem that this guy wrote when he was in a mental asylum for a short period of his life about a cat was not even found until like 75 years ago, and they know now that it's missing its left side, I had to stop researching because the project was, I get to try to finish it, right? Like I get to it's like the opposite of an erasure, right? Like I get to add, and it's kind of, I call it the oh shit moment because that's not really an easy thing to do.
Yeah.
But I couldn't, like the possibilities for that were just sort of like multiplying in my head. And so I had to stop reading about, the way that padlocks worked in the latter 18th century, houses in London or whatever. Yeah. I had to jump into the project.
Yeah. When I was speaking to David Gran about writing Killers of the Flower Moon.
Oh, that is such a good book.
It's amazing. It's one of the best. It's probably the best book I've read this year. It's just in terms of the best narrative book I've read for sure. And, but I remember him talking about, he would say, oh, so-and-so was sitting on a stoop. And he's like, wait a minute, I got to make sure that there was actually a stoop on this house.
Oh
and
God.
So it's like he's got to either try to find a photograph or find property records that somehow would indicate if it did have a stoop. So that's kind of like another wormhole. That could take a whole day to try to figure out. And is it worth it to have that detail in it's going to take you a day to do it? But
I've had those days. My space essay was like that. Like anytime I wanted to use any noun, I had to go. And everything in NASA is documented. So I had to go, which is kind of fun if you don't really feel like writing.
Yeah.
That sounds hardcore though. I bet.
What would you say you've learned the most in the last 5 years or so? And maybe a habit that, or something 5 years ago that you're better at today than you were 5 years ago?
I think I'm getting better at sentences, but I'm still got a long way to go. But I do think if you keep going and keep paying attention to yourself and keep reading, your sentences I'm more nimble with them than I was before. I taught a class in syntax in the sentence, sort of on a personal dare, where I had to really learn. I think you're younger than I am, but I was the child of like whole grammar. So I never really got taught parts of speech and shit. It was this sort of No Child Left Behind way of teaching English. So I didn't know anything about grammar. I just sort of instincted my way through. And then I told myself that I was going to teach this class on style in the sentence and spent a summer trying to teach myself grammar and then trying to teach other people grammar. And then when I started working on the book, I felt more nimble. I felt like I had more tools in my toolbox to play and to make a sentence do what I wanted it to do. And I'm still, I mean, there are so many sentences in this book that I wish I could just swallow every page, you know, that of every copy, just eat it up. But like, I do think that that's better. I think I'm better at being kind of open with myself about what I don't understand, and not like showing up and performing as a writer in the early drafts. I think I'm able to sort of write like a apprentice to the piece. And I think too, and of course, getting better is not meaning that I think that I'm good at it yet. I'm just I'm noting that it is possible to improve, right?
Yeah.
I always used to just yell that like because I think my mentor in grad school said it, that the project or the inquiry of an essay should dictate the way that it moves forward. Like maybe unlike a memoir where you kind of know where it ends, when you sit down to write in the tradition of an essay, you should not 100% know where the piece is going to end up. Not necessarily in terms of topic, but maybe in terms of argument or form or shape or sound. You don't make an outline and then fill in the gaps of that outline. And while I never did that, I didn't 100% know how to activate that, you know, it's going to figure itself out, how to turn the essay on so that it would guide me. I still don't 100% know, but I am closer. I actually believe that I have evidence of that being true now, that that you can, just like I was talking about with the book sort of dictating how it moves, like there is a way to listen while you're researching. I think research is really important in energizing that theory, right? I think I'm closer to being able to manipulate that in a way that is satisfying and not just a bullshit thing that I scream at my students every once in a while.
How do you deal with? I'm gonna assume that you like me get sick of yourself.
I'm so sick of myself right now, man. Like,
really?
we've been talking to each other. I'm like, shut up, Elena. Yeah, no, totally.
But not in terms of our actual personalities. But our own writing and going over it like that. A big reason why I'm having a hard time even getting through the edits of that memoir is I'm so sick of it. I'm so sick of that person in that story, and I'm so sick of I can almost recite it word for word, and you know the 70,000 words it is. I've gone through it so many times, and I'm so sick of myself. Like, do you have moments like that?
Yeah, I think I have a little bit of an advantage over you because I often don't get sick of the subject because the subject is so rarely me. So I could hate the way that I'm writing about this rhino, but all I have to do is sit by myself and think about the fact that this rhino existed and then people reacted to it the ways that they did and the world was so different, and look at all these cool things, you know, that never that's inexhaustibly fascinating to me. And if I'm sick of myself, it's really easy to become sort of, so maybe like with like a book where it's you would have to maybe talk to someone about like I am very energized by your project even though I don't know you, because you're talking about these kind of you're talking about these things that tap in these larger understandings that I have about this game and about fathers and sons and about what it means to burn out in college. And then all of a sudden the book is there, you know, maybe like talking to people about like the reasons people are going to read that book or not. It's not just that you were alive and you played baseball and then you talk to your dad on the phone more now. It's because all of these things are connected to the archetypical.
I think the goal of successful. Well, that should be the goal of any successful memoir, is that you're more or less a conduit for the reader's experience.
Oh, that's so hard.
If I've done my job right, and I hope I'm getting there, anyone, whether fathers and daughters, fathers and sons, they're going to overlay their experience over mine and my father's. They'll kind of, we will dissolve, me, dad, and everyone else, and then they will be immersed in their own truth through it. So that's kind of where I'm at in the thing, where, try not to be self-indulgent, but try to tap into those themes that people will, they're just going to be reading what I'm writing, but they're going to be kind of lost in their own memories. Yeah. And they'll kind of forget that I'm even there.
That's got to be hard to bring into the writing room in a way, you know?
Yeah, I think you can only do it when you're on the 20th draft, which I'm sure is where I'm at this point. Okay. You know, so that's, I mean, I started it in 2009, I think. Wow. And I've taken 2-year breaks from it too. Like I just put it in the drawer and said, I'll see you when I feel like it.
Did you write the Philly book in between, or did you write it before?
Before.
Okay.
But that was all the reporting for the Saratoga book was summer 2009, some backfill research into the winter of 2010, and I wrote that book in 5 months.
Wow.
Like 3,000 words a day.
Holy shit.
Just bang. And then it took another, 6 months to a year of rewrites, and then it was I won't bore listeners with this story, but the way it got published was a very serendipitous thing that maybe I can share a different time.
Cool.
And
I'll tune
with
in.
you off mic.
Send me an email so I make sure I don't miss that one.
Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where you just have to kind of be open to. I was at here I go. I was just at a retail job. I was sitting across from somebody who happened to know an editor looking for a Saratoga book, and I had the manuscript written. I wrote it on spec, which is not something you typically do in nonfiction.
No.
But I just wrote the thing, and then pretty much I sent it off, and a few months later, they're like, oh yeah, we'll publish it.
Oh my God. Yeah.
So that's what happened.
That's one of those stories that like when you almost don't want to tell, because I think people listen to writers telling their publishing stories so that they can find templates.
Yeah.
But there's no.
No, you just have to. Well, the lesson is like you never know what chance encounter might lead to some good fortune.
Yeah.
For you, you have to just be open to it. Anyone you shake hands with, it could be a person who knows someone. But if you're never going into that situation expecting something like that to happen, but you never know if it can.
Right.
Just go in there with sort of an open mind and an open heart and some genuine interest in the person across from you, and then, I mean, nothing bad will happen, but maybe something good will happen too.
Right. And you don't have to necessarily go to like a $200 entry fee writing conference to meet people who can help facilitate your projects.
Yeah.
Maybe being in the world for free and being open and empathetic can help too. Yeah.
Oh my God.
That's a good lesson.
I think so. Maybe we should leave it in.
Yeah. Why not?
Oh man. Well,
just cut all that stuff I said about how much I hate myself or how much I like about myself. Just cut both of those things.
All right. Maybe we'll have a group edit for this.
Yeah.
Well, I think I should really be mindful of your time. I feel like I could talk to you for another 2 hours, but that just means we'll have to have another one of these. Maybe I'll bring the rig up to Corvallis, and that way save you a trip down here. So, you get the dishes done, you scrub that toilet, don't forget the backside, gets nasty. Did you walk your dog? This was a good dog walking episode. How great is Elena? You want her to be a regular on the show, like once a quarter? Ping me on Twitter, @BrendanO'Mara, and maybe even ping Elena too, and say, yeah, go on the show every 3 months or so. Check yes or no. Yeah, we'll rock like we're in middle school. I wonder what it's like to be as smart as Elena, or as talented. Like, I wonder what that's like. I wouldn't know. Anyway, hey, if you dig the show, consider sharing it with a CNF buddy. You know, why? Because I don't want to rely on social networks to do the work. Those are just wormholes that things get buried. We are the social network, and if we email and share with friends, we are tethered by something more than algorithms, right? Also, don't forget about the old monthly newsletter. It's a bit of monthly goodness, 12 times a year. Head over to BrendanO'Mara.com, hey, and subscribe. You can unsubscribe at any time, but know that I take it wicked personally if you do. No pressure. Remember, if you can't do, interview. See ya!